Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another edition of the Raw Prospect Podcast. My name is Michael Ween. Welcome in here on this Sunday night, May 12th, 9:21 p.m. Happy Mother's Day to all the great mothers out there. Hope you guys have had a great Sunday and a good start to your week. Today, we have a big NBA episode, and me and I are going to be talking our takeaways so far from the NBA Conference Semifinals, the NBA Draft Lottery, the Suns coaching search, and a mini WNBA preview as the WNBA season gets kicked off this week. So with all that being said, welcome in, and let me welcome my co-host, Emmy Nixon, into the show. Emmy, what's up? How are you?
Doing pretty well, man. I had to kind of refresh my screen there, but yeah, I'm excited to be getting into some NBA stuff again, man. We've been being pretty consistent with it throughout these playoffs, so we've had some pretty good games these past few days to cover. So a lot to talk about. Let's get
I
into
think
it.
this is our third consecutive week where we're having an episode. We did our last NBA episode last Sunday, in fact, and in that episode, we previewed all these series and talked about the teams that have been eliminated in the first round, the fallout from the first round. We're going to cover some more of that in this episode as the Suns have recently made the decision to fire Frank Vogel and hire Mike Budenholzer. We're also going to talk about the WNBA. The season gets kicked off, I think it's Tuesday or Wednesday. We're going to have our storylines and players that we're watching for this upcoming WNBA season. We're going to get into all the series and what we've been seeing in this second round. But first, I just want to mention a couple takeaways I have from the draft lottery, which was actually this afternoon. I don't want to say this is like my winners and losers because the draft lottery is a lot of luck. And these teams really have no control over what happens in that room where the balls are, drawn. But what I will say is I do think there were a couple clear winners and a couple of fan bases that clearly probably come out of this a little bit disappointed. I think the obvious winner is the Atlanta Hawks, who get the number one pick after having 3% odds to get the top pick, having never won the lottery. I think even though this is a weak draft specifically at the top, this gives them more flexibility, especially when you consider that they don't really own their first-round picks here the next couple of years from the DeJounte Murray trade. This gives them more flexibility in how they choose to kind of reset moving forward. I thought the Spurs really couldn't lose today given the situation that they're in with how many picks they have, but they end up not only getting their pick, which gets into the top four at pick number 4, where they'll have a chance to probably pick a really nice point guard, Topic or Dillingham. I'd be happy with either option. But they also get the Toronto pick from the Jakob Poeltl trade, which ends up at number 8. That was a Toronto top 6 protected. So if it fell outside the top 6, the Spurs would get it, and it ended up happening. So they get 2 lottery picks, not only in the top 14, but in the top 10. And they'll probably have 2 or 3 more next year, which I'm happy about. And then obviously there were a couple teams and fan bases I think were disappointed coming out of today. Obviously, Detroit, I got a feel for you guys. 54 wins over the past 3 seasons combined. 2 straight years with the worst record in basketball. And you come away with 3 consecutive picks at number 5. However, it's not all bad. You had the number 5 pick last year. You selected Oscar Thompson, who shows great promise this year, despite being maybe overshadowed by some of the other great rookies. Showed the ability to shoot the ball and as an excellent perimeter defender. You could still get a good player there in a draft that's probably more so filled with role players.
Yeah. I think there's some high quality role players
Yeah,
this
high
draft.
quality role players. But got a feel for them. And then Toronto, obviously having their pick conveyed to San Antonio. Um, that stinks a little bit, but at least they still have a pick at 19, where I think they got it in the trade with Indiana for Siakam. So they still have a first round pick. They're just not going to be in the lottery for a team that I think was hoping they would be in the top six. So those were kind of my mini takeaways and reactions to the lottery. I thought I'd mention it and see if you have anything else to add on to it before we move on into the actual games that are taking place.
Well, I think Toronto. I think that result was a little bit tough, as you mentioned. Like I think looking back at the Jakob Pertl trade, like it was good to get him back in the building and bring in some rim protection, but it didn't end up resulting into anything. Like that, they had barely made the play in last year and then missed out on it this year by a good margin. So that trade kind of was a dud. Um, and to lose out on a lottery pick, that does kind of hurt. So that's the team that I look at. The Pistons is the obvious one. I'm not going to get into their situation. I think there's a possibility they trade that pick and try to be a little bit more aggressive, kind of go the Rockets route from last year with all the cap space they have. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a Mikal Bridges level player somewhere in this draft. I think there's a lower level star in there, high quality role player.
Yeah, I agree. Any quick thoughts on Atlanta winning the lottery before we move on?
Um, Not really. It really is a mystery who they're gonna pick. It's just gonna depend on the draft workouts, I guess, because nobody's really, you know, like taking the reins on this draft. Really, there's no consensus number one. But if I were to guess, they would probably take. I don't want to say a guard because then they would have to trade one of those two guys, which I thought they were going to do anyway. But yeah, I don't really know at this point. I would have to think about it a little longer.
All right, let's go ahead and get into the games as we are looking to come through here with a pretty efficient episode. I wanted to start actually in the Eastern Conference um, with first the series that played its game for today, the Indiana Pacers against the New York Knicks. Since that's most fresh on my mind, aside from what's actually happened tonight with the Nuggets and the Timberwolves. In your eyes, from what you've seen, especially in games 3 and games 4, which is most fresh on our minds, with the Knicks injury situation and their health situation, what has allowed Indiana, in your opinion, to get back in the series after falling behind 2-0 at Madison Square Garden? And then secondly, what is your prediction as it's now pretty much a best of 3 series from here on out?
Well, I think it all is about the defense on Jalen Brunson. They switched Nemhard with Neesmith. They put Neesmith on Brunson, a little bit more length, a little bit more size. And historically, I know Jalen Brunson hasn't always been, this caliber of player, but historically in the playoffs, Jalen Brunson has struggled with size and length. Like if you think about how he played in those, Clippers series when he was with the Mavericks, or the Warriors series in the conference finals, then putting, Wiggins, all those perimeter defenders they had on that championship team. But yeah, he tends to struggle with that type of player. So I think that was the right move, and from there, I think Neesmith with his physicality set the tone, and everybody on that team, like they were locked in and committed these last two games to getting it done on the defensive end. Um, Now, I think with all the injuries that the Knicks have had, the Knicks weren't able to match that defensive efficiency on the other end like they normally would, just because I just think they're lacking the personnel right now. The fact that you're throwing Alec Burks out there in a pivotal playoff game, that doesn't bode well. It just really doesn't. Or even Jericho Sims, who I love him. He's a Longhorn, but I just don't think he's really ready for this moment right now. And the front court injuries, it's really killed their options. Like it's not looking good for them right now.
Yeah, you hit on my first point, spot on. What the Pacers have done, the adjustments that they made defensively, um, obviously helps. They've put Neesmith on Brunson. He's not really allowed Brunson to get anything real easy. He's made it tough on him, especially out there on the perimeter. They've really refused to give the Knicks the Brunson Halliburton matchup on that end of the floor. And it's been about Neesmith's willingness to fight through those hard screens by whoever it may be, Hartenstein or whoever, and get back in front of Brunson to disrupt his rhythm and disrupt his dribble. But secondly, I think one of the last teams in the NBA that you would want to have played this year, especially when you're not healthy, is the Pacers. And the reason being is because they consistently push the ball in transition.
Yeah.
And it's not just after a miss, right? It's not just after a defensive rebound. It's after makes. It's in any situation. They push the ball. They have three primary ball handlers that they really can push the pace with. You talk about Nimhard, you talk about Tyrese Halliburton, and then TJ McConnell, who comes off the bench. They
He
have
was
three
great today.
guards.
He
Yeah,
was fantastic today.
he was absolutely fantastic today. He'll push the ball, and they can penetrate, create numbers advantages on that end of the floor, and that's where you get things like the Pacers scoring 38 points in transition today, which was a big reason why they were able to not only surge far ahead in that game, it was pretty much over, at halftime, but they were able to really, I think, make the Knicks tired. And that's something we talked about in our series preview. We talked about how the pace would play a factor in who has the advantage in each series. I also think Tyrese Halliburton has played much better since game one. A game one in which he went 2 for 6 in just 6 points. Since then, he's averaged pretty much 30 points on 55% shooting. That's made a huge difference for Indiana. Brunson has not necessarily played his best ball in Indiana so far, 16 for 43, just 2 of 11 from three-point range since that game 2 where he got hurt and then came back to score 24 points in the second half. I am a little bit worried about the Knicks, given who's it? We don't know really when Anunoby is going to be
Yeah,
back.
OG doesn't look close right now from what I'm
Yeah,
seeing.
he has that hamstring injury. Mitchell Robinson's out for the foreseeable future. I think it's indefinitely, right?
Yeah.
They're just kind of banged up, and we'll have to see if they have enough. It's the good thing is you still are in an advantageous situation given that there's 3 games left in this series, and you get 2 of those at home.
Yep.
So if you can just take care of business in MSG, which you have been able to do, then you should be okay. But it is a little bit scary right now for New York because I thought that they would be able to at least get a game in Indiana. But credit to the Pacers. They made the right adjustments, and now this is really a series. This is one that I think goes 7 games.
Yeah, I think not only just like them pushing the pace and getting up the floor, but the pace that they play within the half court also, just with the cutting and the dribble penetration. You mentioned that, like they play offense with urgency,
Yeah,
and it's that's what makes it tough to guard because when you're here the example I can think of is say the Mavericks, for example, when Luka gets into himself, him dribbling like the entire possession. He's been a lot better about this lately, but sometimes gets in a mode where he's dribbling a lot and people are kind of standing around. The Pacers never have that. They really move it around. And I think that's what I like most about Tyrese Halliburton is just the fact that he's never going to force anything. Like he's just going to get it in the flow of the offense. And he, for a young player, has a really good sense of when his team needs him to score. So he's really impressive from that standpoint.
absolutely. Do you have a prediction for who wins the series? Has your prediction changed?
I think I think it's going to 7, but I think I like the Pacers in 7, just because the Knicks are in a really rough spot with their current rotations. I think we're gonna have to see a lot more Precious Achua. We're gonna have to see a lot more Alec Burks. Um, and the options are running dry for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it sucks because I did want the Knicks. I do want the Knicks to win the series.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to see Knicks Celtics, but not this version of the Knicks.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's address Celtics, Cavs, and then we'll go to the West. Your quick thoughts on the Celtics who win Game 3 after what was a pretty embarrassing effort in Game 2 at home in Boston. They're now up 2-1 in the series. Just your overall takeaways.
Well, I think Jason Tatum had a vintage Jason Tatum game, and I think from there the Celtics offense can be, a lot more comfortable in terms of the hierarchy. So I think Brown, he was really comfortable working off of, driving closeouts, working off of a defense that was already in rotation. Same with Derek White. Same with Drew Holiday. They were getting their spots, getting open looks, and I think that all starts with Tatum. Now, it's not that I think Tatum has to shoot perfect or whatever. We know what he is defensively. We know that he makes an impact on the game regardless. My thing is just that I want him to be aggressive like that every night. Like aggressive getting to the rim early on in the game, just so you can see the ball go in the basket, maybe get to the lines, like see the ball go through the hoop, get in a rhythm, and then let that three ball go. I think too many times you see him, settle for those jump shots, and he's great at that shot, but it's just not the right shot to start a physical playoff game with.
Yeah. Tatum bounced back. What
Yep.
was it, yesterday? Yeah. Last night. He played good. I thought it was his best game so far the playoffs. The keys for Boston, right? Because they're just outright more talented than Cleveland is. And we knew that coming into the series. One thing Jason Timpf mentioned, and I want to give him credit for this in his little recap this morning, was Donovan Mitchell is really the only player on that Cavs team with any sort of offensive scoring resiliency, meaning
Yeah.
he's going to be able to get his even when the defensive pressure from Boston ramps up. Like he's going to be able to he's going to be the one guy on that team that's able to, I think, sustain his production on that end of the floor consistently with the 4 excellent perimeter defenders that the Celtics are able to throw out there.
Right.
The key for Boston is maintaining that level of focus and intensity at all times on the defensive end of the floor. And we said that in the preview. We said that in round one. You mentioned it, in fact. When they want to, they can win a game on that end of the floor. Like they are really, really good. They have perimeter defenders that start for them that would be like the best perimeter defender on a lot of other NBA teams in the league. With Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Drew Holiday, like they're set up in a way where I think they can make up a little bit for the loss of Porzingis on the inside just because they have that basically wall of great perimeter defenders. The key is they just sometimes lack a little bit in intensity and focus on that end of the floor.
Yeah.
We saw it happen in game two against Miami, and we saw it happen pretty much again in a different way against Cleveland in game two. Another interesting trend that I just want to throw out there, because I think the Celtics ultimately get this done in 5, maybe 6 games. Maybe Cleveland can get a game tomorrow. I don't know when game 4 is. The interesting trend for Boston, though, that I want to mention is dating back to the start of, I think it is the 2022 playoffs. So 2 years ago. Boston is 16-16 in home playoff games. And I think they're 16-7 on the road. It's just interesting that they haven't necessarily done a great job of defending home court, yet they've been so great on the road. I I don't know what you attribute that to. It's just an interesting trend to keep an eye on moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. I think Boston is such an interesting team because it's very clear that you have a really young coach that's still kind of developing his coaching style. And I think because of that, I think his, I this is all just, outside looking in, my observation. But what it seems like to me is the, defensive messaging isn't always there. They're always, very focused on offense, it seems, or at least, intentional about their offense in terms of, getting to their threes. But defensively, it doesn't really, they don't, um, work as a unit as well as like, a Minnesota, with when they're like rotating defensively, like it's, they're on a string, and they did have a lot of roster turnover this past year. That could possibly be part of it. But I also just think I'm still not sure about Joe Mazzulla as a defensive coach, because we saw this last year too with their defense taking a real step back. Like it was in that finals run, their defense was as good as any defense we've seen in the past 5 to 7 years, and then we saw a real step back when Missoula took over. So it's going to be interesting to keep tabs on that.
Absolutely. Let's go over to the Western Conference. After losing game 1 of the series, Dallas, the Mavericks,
They're
bounced back to win 2 in a row, and they're now up 2-1. They have the home court advantage now. I think they have a great opportunity to steal both in Oklahoma City. Why not I start with a couple of my thoughts, and then I'll pass
yeah,
it to
go ahead.
you. I think, first of all, PJ Washington has to be mentioned first because of his efforts in game 3, what he did yesterday, where I think he scored 19 first half points and really set the tone with his physicality on both ends of the floor. That has to be mentioned. He knocked down. There was a game defining stretch in the third quarter as Oklahoma City was always kind of keeping it within reach where Washington knocked down 2 3-pointers, had a dunk, and pulled down 2 rebounds, 2 important rebounds during a Dallas 16-0 run, where they took what was a 10-point deficit and turned it into a 6-point lead.
Yeah.
I thought he was just fantastic. He got efficient shots. He made the most of his opportunities, and he's been awesome. Dallas is 4-2 in the postseason when PJ Washington scores 20 or more points. He's obviously an important part of this team, and I think that plays into my next point, which is Dallas. I think, especially in the past 2 games, has really dominated on the inside the paint. Um, Look, they only out rebounded Oklahoma City by 7 rebounds, 7 boards yesterday, but they really destroyed the Thunder on the offensive glass, 15-6. They got a ton of second chance opportunities. Um, they outscored them 16-9 in second chance points. They're imposing their physicality down low. I've been really impressed with what they've been able to do. OKC entered Game 3 ranking 12th among 16 playoff teams in offensive rebounds per game. Dallas stood 4th at almost 12 offensive rebounds per game. And so far in the playoffs, teams that win the overall battle on the glass are 42-11. And Dallas has done a fantastic job of that. And then Kyrie Irving, like, my goodness, what this guy is doing, especially in the fourth quarters of these games, it's unbelievable. In the fourth quarter alone, this postseason, he's shooting 53% from the floor and 53% from deep. And he's averaging 8 points in the fourth quarter alone. Um, it's been a pleasantry to watch. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you made a lot of great points there. You made a lot of points that I was going to try to make too as well. But man, I just got to say that like the physicality you mentioned, man, like I fall in love with this team every time I watch them, man. Like the Mavericks as a franchise in my lifetime have been a team that has never been good at rebounding outside of the year we had Tyson Chandler, which is when we won the title, of course. That was the only year I could think of where we weren't just getting, abused in the paint. Um, and this physicality of this team, like this is unlike any Mavs team I remember, man. Like this is the most physical Mavs team I've ever seen for sure. And man, like the defense, the team chemistry, like you can see it. I think that's the underrated part of it is the fact that you bring these two guys in February and you have 3 months to put this thing together and it just clicked. And I've given Jason Kidd a lot of flack in the past for this, that, and the other, but man, I think his best attribute as a coach is managing personalities. Because I think, you know, when the Mavs made the trade for Kyrie Irving, the initial thought was just, how is this going to work? Can Kyrie, be on the court? And will he, get along with Luka? Will this work? And man, like it just seems like Kyrie has thrived in the role, and Luka has welcomed every part of it. Man, it's just been great to watch. From the OKC point, real quick, I know I kind of went on a tangent there. Um, I think it was really interesting to see the minute distribution there for the Thunder. I was really surprised with how often Chet went out of the game. He only played 34 minutes in a really tight game 3 that was winnable. And every time he was in there, he dominated the paint. I think 5 blocks, altered a bunch more shots than that. It just felt like whenever he was in the game, the Mavs could not finish a layup or score in the paint outside of maybe Luka, and that was kind of it. So Chet playing 34 minutes was a little bit strange to me. And then, a lot of people are going to want to talk about the Josh Giddey thing. I'm not, opposed to them playing Josh Giddey. I'm just opposed to them playing Josh Giddey in the starting lineup, or in the starting of the second half as well, too. Like, I think Josh Giddey right now would be most comfortable running the second unit as their point guard. And I think him being able to initiate, be on the ball a little bit more, I think he would, find a little bit of a better rhythm that way, because I think he's a capable shooter. He's a better shooter than what he's shown so far in this series. So I think if I'm Mark Dagnall, that's the adjustment I make to the rotation. I just play my guys a lot more. I just play Chet a lot more. I asked Jalen Williams, like, yo, like, you need to shoot more than 12 times. You're our second best player. You got to shoot at least 15 times. You could be a little bit more aggressive. And then from there, it's just going to be about, can you match, the Mavs on the boards? Because it really just felt like the Mavs dominated those non-Chet minutes, and that's what kind of was the difference in the game.
Yeah, I agree. It's also kind of surprising to me that all of these series have basically gone to an every other day schedule.
Yeah.
But I guess that's how it works. It probably doesn't help, especially for a team like the Knicks, that that's the case. But that's the
Yeah.
way it is. Okay, let's get to what I think is still the best series of the entire playoffs, which is this Timberwolves Nuggets series. Now, the latest to happen is that the Denver Nuggets, after falling down 2-0, have tied the series with 2 wins in Minnesota. So all the road teams have won every single game so far in this series. There's a lot to discuss here. So I'm going to let you start us off and take the discussion where you think is appropriate.
Well, I think here's what I'll start with. I think the Minnesota was, in a position where they had already risen up to their, playoff level intensity in their A game, so to speak. And Denver had not done that in the LA series. That's just the reality of it. And I know, both series were short and whatnot, but we mentioned that Denver didn't look that great at times in the LA series, and that showed itself in this series as well. I think what Chase and Tim likes to say a lot on Hoops Tonight is you can't fake desperation. You can't fake urgency. In game 3, it just felt like they were doing a lot of the same things. They were just doing them better. Like it just as simple as that. You know, the movement off the ball, like it was less casual. Like they were, getting somewhere offense. They were getting into the paint and creating that dribble penetration. It looked like Jamal Murray had a little bit more burst. The screens were, hitting their targets, making contact. So I just think offensively, they brought just a higher level of execution, a level that we all knew they were capable of. We were just kind of waiting to see it. And now that the series is tied, I think the winner of this series is going to win Game 5. Like
Yeah,
I
I agree with
don't
that.
have a prediction or anything, but man, like Game 5 is going to be a battle for the ages. My goodness, just this feels like a rivalry in the making.
Indeed. I think the winner of this series is going to be whoever wins Game 5. And the trend is it might be Minnesota because the road team has won every single game this series. But Now Denver has the momentum back, it seems like. A couple of things that I'll add on to your points that you made. Number one, tonight, especially, it was a disastrous game by the Minnesota supporting cast, especially with in a situation where Denver supporting cast played really, really well. And by supporting cast, I mean guys outside of Murray and Jokic,
Right.
guys outside of Edwards and I guess Karl Anthony Towns, right? I mean, it wasn't a great game for them. Karl Anthony Towns took 18 shots. I don't think he had business taking a lot of those shots. Um, you look at the numbers and how it actually played out. Anthony Edwards scored 44 points on 16 to 25 shooting. That's 64%. He had 5 rebounds, 5 assists. He played 45 and a half minutes in this game. The Wolves won those minutes, those 45 minutes, by 5 points. In the 2 minutes 40 seconds he was off the court, they lost by 13 points.
Wow.
So that really made a difference. That shows you like it wasn't a great night for Minnesota supporting cast. Also, I think this was a true all-time NBA legend test for Nikola Jokic. After losing games 1 and games 2, this is probably the most adversity he's ever faced as a favorite or as the favorite, and he passed the test with flying colors with what he was able to do games 3 and games 4. Aaron Gordon, fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
10 out of 10 effort, both ends of the floor, offensively and defensively. Him and Jokic tonight combined to score 62 points of their 115. They were just great. And then I think the Denver bench has done a good job of stepping up and giving them the production that they need moving forward. Tonight, I don't know what the final numbers were. I can check real fast, but the bench has been a lot better than it was the first 2 games. Tonight, they get 10 points from Justin Holiday. They get 6 points from Reggie Jackson and 11 points from Christian Braun. And they're just getting much better performance from guys like Aaron Gordon. Jamal Murray has really stepped up past 2 games. And then if you look at what happened in game 3 of the series, I think all 5 of starters scored in double figures. So it's just been better execution. They're making more shots, and their championship medal is really shining through after not only losing the first 2 games of the series, but I'd venture to say like those 2 games really weren't all that close.
Yeah. No, they were blowouts. When I texted my dad after game 2, I was like, this was a Game of Thrones finale level slaughter. Like it
Yeah,
was,
I mean it's no joke.
yeah.
The physicality. Yeah, I think game 5 is. I mean, is game 5 a Western Conference Finals game 7? Like, is that going to be the team? If that's the team that goes on to win the series, could that be the team that eventually ends up in the finals, in your opinion? Or do you think the Mavs
I
and or the Thunder
that
have something to say about that?
I think the Mavs would definitely have something to say about that. I think if it's the Nuggets that go through, um, the Thunder, I think would be able to take the Nuggets to 6 games, depending on how they fare on the interior. But that would be a tough matchup if it was Minnesota. So I'm not counting out the Mavs completely, but definitely that team is like the winner of this series is going to be the favorite, I think, regardless.
Yeah. Anything else we missed on the 4 series before we move on into the last third of the podcast?
Well, the last bit is just Jamal Murray, man. I didn't get to watch the game tonight, but I saw the clip of how they ended the first half, which is, I mean, that's That's brutal. But man, Jamal Murray, like you talk about, legacy on the line type of thing. Like I don't think I would go that far, but there was certainly, some questionable performances so far in this playoff run. And for him to step up like this, game 3 and game 4 on the road, crowd booing him to hell and back, like that was, I mean, that was legendary stuff, man.
Yeah. If you think about what could happen here, you're going to have Timberwolves Nuggets game 5 on Tuesday. Then you'll have game 6 on Thursday. And then they'll have game 7, if it goes that far as both of us predict, on Sunday. And on Sunday, you could have Pacers Knicks game 7, which I think gets that far. Timberwolves Nuggets game 7, which I think gets that far. And the final day of the PGA Championship,
Mm.
the second major of the year. So, and I'm probably forgetting other sporting events that are going on that day. So that could be exciting. All right, let's get into the last third of the show. Let's quickly address we talked about the Suns some in our last episode. If you missed that, go check it out. It's under the live section of our YouTube channel. It's also posted and I think pinned on our Twitter account. So go check it out. The Suns, since we last talked, fired Frank Vogel and they hired Mike Budenholzer like less than 24 hours after firing Frank Vogel. So I just want your quick thoughts on not only getting rid of Vogel, which we did maybe suspect a little bit when we talked last Sunday, but hiring Mike Budenholzer, him being the choice, and him being the choice as quickly as he was.
Yeah, man, I'm not sure what to think really about this hire. Like I like Bud as a coach, and I think he coaches up defenses really well. But the downside to Bud all the time, was one, playoff adjustments, and two, can he design an offense to maximize his stars? Like for years we saw Giannis bringing the ball up the court and then kind of ended up playing into the hands of kind of that wall up defense that Toronto was running all those years. And like it took Bud a while to kind of come up with answers for that. And for him to come in on this, kind of win now situation with 3 stars that it's not going to be easy to find, the magic touch offensively to get this thing rolling. I don't know. I think
Yeah,
it's I think it's a lateral hire. I really do. But they definitely needed a new voice. I'll say that.
they did. The coach they hired he's a good coach.
Yeah.
Does this move the needle though for Phoenix? Shoulder
Nope.
shrug. No, not really. That's the thing. Like, how are they going to actually make moves this offseason that will move the needle and move it in the right direction? They're very limited in the things they can do. They needed a new voice. Yes, he's really the only other like championship winning coach out in the market outside of the one that they had already, which was Frank Vogel. Look, we'll look back on this a year from now and we'll probably talk about whether or not they got rid of Vogel too fast or whether or not maybe Budenholzer was able to find something and the new voice was able to re-energize the locker room or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, I'm in a wait and see approach with this. They're just really in a weird situation. They're between, what's the saying, a rock and a hard place. Like, they're just not. It's hard to move the needle forward with a coaching hire, especially when it's kind of a lateral hire, going from one championship winning coach to another championship winning coach. Like Budenholzer, I we could ramble all day. We're just going to talk ourselves in circles at the end of the day. I just wanted to get your initial thoughts on that. Anything else NBA wise before we really fast talk about the WNBA?
Well, uh, actually, no, I don't think there's much
Okay.
else to say.
All right. We have 15 minutes. We'll see how many we can get to, but we're just going to go back and forth and name out players, teams, and or storylines. Can be any of the three that we're intrigued by for the upcoming WNBA season. So I'll let Emmy start us off.
Well, to me, number one, it has to be Las Vegas. The Aces are going for a three-peat, and with how well Asia Wilson has played these past few years, her winning, I think it's been two MVPs in a row, or it was either her or B Stewie who that won it, but I can't quite remember. But either way, I mean, it's a super team in Las Vegas right now. I think they lost like 3 games in the regular season last year. Um, they're completely stacked, and right now I'm not sure I see them losing. Like it'll be interesting to see how they do because 3 playoff runs in a row, as we know, like in all sports, that's a lot of stress on all those players. Like especially keeping that same core for all those years, playing all of those games. I mean, it's a lot. So I think that'll be the storyline to watch for me.
Yeah, that's a good one. My number one, outside of the one you mentioned, was really interested to see if there is a next step to be taken for the New York Liberty. They do have the reigning MVP in Brianna Stewart. Um, they really dominated in a way the offseason a year ago by adding their new big three: Brianna Stewart, John Cal Jones, and uh, gosh, I'm blanking
Sabrina
on the other. Yeah,
Ionescu.
yeah, Sabrina Ionescu. Um, the results were impressive. They went 32-8. Brianna Stewart won her second MVP. Um, you know, she averaged 23 points and 9.5 rebounds per game. She led the Liberty in both those categories last year. She edged out Asia Wilson and Alyssa Thomas in like a really tight 3-way MVP race. But after really cruising through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, they met their match in the Las Vegas Aces. And so I guess what is the next step here for the Liberty? Can they get over the hump? I mean, you just mentioned you don't really see Las Vegas in a situation where they're going to lose, but I don't know. The Liberty are interesting. Like they'd be the next team I'm watching for.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. And those two definitely feel like the unequivocal favorites to meet in the finals again. So I'm with you on that.
yeah. All right. Keep going. Do you have another player, team, or storyline that you're watching?
Well, I have kind of adopted the Dallas Wings as my team. Um, and for them, they were in the conference finals last year. You know, I think lost in 5 games to the Aces, that, really deep, star studded team, obviously, with Chelsea Gray, Asia, um, Kelsey Plum. The Wings are young and kind of learning on the fly, and you could kind of see that in that playoff series. They, you know, were kind of hanging with them a lot of the time. They were able to defend one on one without having to, go into a lot of rotation a lot of the time. Like they were able to hang for a lot of it. but just in the waning moments of these games, it kind of felt like their offensive execution kind of fell apart. So my question for them would just be like, their second star, Setu Sabali, she's going to be out for a while to start this season. So are they going to be able to, stay afloat with her out? Arike Agumbawale is going to have to really carry the load. And I actually have her as kind of like a dark horse MVP candidate, actually. But um, she's going to have to do a lot to keep this team afloat in a tough Western Conference right now. So that would be my second storyline.
I like it. I have a couple, and then I'll pretty much be done for tonight. Number one, it's kind of tangentially applied to the WNBA, but uh, the Olympics are this summer, as we know. And so the WNBA is going to be taking a break from, I think it's July 21st to August 14th, as many of the league stars are going to go compete in the Olympics. And uh, the USA is going to play for their 10th Olympic gold medal.
Mm.
Now, I think it was during the Final Four, like during the NCAA tournament, that they had the training camp for the Olympics. And 14 players were invited. And among the names that were invited, you know, household names that our audience might know: Brittany Griner, Sabrina Ionescu, Brianna Stewart, Diana Taurasi, Aja Wilson, among others. You know, Jackie Young, who's the Aces point guard, um, and then Caitlin Clark was also invited. However, she missed the training camp because she was in the Final Four. So that will be an interesting storyline to follow throughout the season. Who ultimately makes the team? There will only be 12 that make the roster.
Mm.
And then others will participate in some kind of 3 on 3 kind of event. So that'll be interesting. The Olympics are coming up sooner rather than later. And then I just like everyone's going to ask, how good is Caitlin Clark actually going to be in the WNBA? But those questions will answer themselves in due time. I think she's going to be excellent. I just am interested to see like how much of an effect does she actually have on the WNBA as a whole in the viewership. If you look at the WNBA, they had a significant attendance uptick last year from 6,615 fans per game. Or sorry, it was a 16% increase from 2022 to 2023. Um, and the 6,615 fans per game last year was the league's highest average attendance since 2018.
Mm.
And so I'm interested to see like how much can Caitlin Clark affect the popularity of the WNBA as she did women's college basketball. Uh, I know she'll have an impact. It's just how big of an impact will it be? Of course, being in Indiana is another thing, right? And then Angel Reese is fascinating for me. She was the number 7 overall pick by the Chicago Sky after another really nice season at LSU. Um, kind of a mixed bag so far in the preseason, but I'm interested to see like how does her career start. So obviously keeping a keen eye on all the rookies because I did watch a good amount of women's college basketball. But I'm excited for the WNBA season. I'll be keeping track and we'll talk about it some moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. Those two are good ones. I think it'll be kind of similar to kind of how the Premier League does it with all their intermission throughout their season for international play. So nothing too crazy there, but yeah, it is an interesting storyline just with who will make the cut and who won't. And then the rookies, I think Caitlin Clark will probably, maybe first part of the season, bring in, a good audience, and then maybe it'll dip a little bit, and then eventually she'll kind of hit her stride and kind of have like a scoring run when she kind of has things click a little bit at the pro level, and then the viewership will probably come back in at that point. It'll also help if the Fever make the playoffs. That would be pretty big if we get to see, you know, maybe Caitlin Clark in the playoffs versus Ionescu or something like that. Like that would
Oh
be
my,
really fun.
yeah, absolutely. Okay. Wow, we covered a lot in just 56 short minutes.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for tuning in here on a Sunday night. Hopefully, you guys have a fantastic start to your week. It's a busy week in sports, as I mentioned here before. We have the second major of the year, the PGA Championship. We have an episode coming, I believe, tomorrow, where we'll do our player draft. We'll talk about the PGA Championship. We'll do a short recap of the Masters and who won the competition. It's probably pretty obvious to you guys who listened to that episode. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Valhalla, which is where the PGA Championship is being played this year, and maybe some other storylines right now in golf. We also have one or two dit holes coming. One of them probably will be solo, but the other will be with Emmy. So keep an eye out for that. But it's going to be a lighter week on the channel because I'll be in Austin this weekend. Family will be in town over the next couple of weeks. And then Emmy has some stuff going on as well. So
Yeah.
we'll have content for you, but it just won't be as much as maybe some past weeks. And then we'll be back to regularly scheduled programming next week for the conference finals and everything else that we've got going on. We'll probably have a
Yep.
baseball episode out as well. So keep an eye out for all the great stuff here on the Raw Prospect Podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe. Tell your friends about us. Any parting shots before we get out of here?
Mavs and 6.
I like it. I like it. Until next time, until tomorrow, we're out. Peace.
Peace out.